everyone, welcome back to the Nello Reads channel. Our first Tales from Tech Support story of the day comes from 12 Altoids 34. I'll have you know, I've been working on computers for 10 years. That's how the call started. Then she went on to tell me how she wasn't going to be talked to like some child. This is gonna go great, I moaned internally. Her computer was running slow. We ran through a few things, and I asked her to shut down her PC and let me know when it was off. About 4 seconds later, she tells me it's off. Impossible. I ask her to turn it on again and let me know when we can get back to the desktop. 3 seconds later, she says it's back up. Ma'am, can you tell me exactly how you're shutting down your computer? Here it comes. She launches into a tirade about how she works on a computer every day at work and blah 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 for about 5 minutes. I understand, ma'am, and I'm simply asking the steps to verify you are taking the proper procedure for this computer. Of course I am. I pushed the button on the computer. Is that the computer where you see the images, or under your desk? What do you mean? That's a stupid question. The computer where the information comes up. I take a deep breath. Ma'am, that's not the computer. That's your monitor. What? You're not making sense. That's how we all shut down our computers at work. I explained that at work, she doesn't have a computer, but a workstation on a network. I explained that turning off the monitor does not affect the PC at all. Then I walk her through proper shutdown procedures and we reboot her PC. When it reboots, it installs several updates, including multiple driver updates. Hey, you made the colors work again. She never mentioned video issues. She ends with, and it's running smoother again. Some people just don't make sense to me. How can you go, I've worked on computers for 10 years, I'm an expert, and then when the IT guy tries to help you, you get all stuck up about it. I've personally worked on computers as a hobby for over 10 years, and there's still a ton of stuff I don't know. If someone tries to teach me something, I'm gonna sit, be nice, and listen. I'm not gonna argue that I'm the greatest computer wizard to ever bless the earth. In fact, I still haven't figured out how to get everyone to press the like button yet, which you should totally do if you haven't already. Our next story comes from CLRL Miller, reprimanded for using vocabulary a manager didn't understand. So, several years ago, I was in a role that required imaging and building systems. Thankfully, we used a commercial product that was able to network boot systems, lay down a baseline OS, then install software packages, updates, configuration files, corporate settings, etc. It worked quite well after I'd spent some time with the product, and on average, a complete system build could be completed in under an hour. Under 45 minutes on average. A few tweaks for the individual users were needed afterwards, but these took about 5 to 10 minutes and worked nearly automatically, i.e. a desktop tech sets up the build process, clicks go, and watches/waits for the system to complete while answering email, gets coffee, whatever. They built a few dozen systems daily. I worked with the server and system build team and had little to do or nothing to do with delivering systems to actual users. That was desktop support. A few months go by and a manager for the desktop support group, we'll call her P, faces criticism that her group takes much too long to get systems to users. Sometimes this was a few days, but sometimes a week or more. I'd heard complaints from her staff that they'd been forbidden to deploy any system to any user prior to either her or her assistant having a look at the systems and reviewing them for approval. This is where the days-long delay stemmed. This, of course, made no sense whatsoever since each system had been built using the exact same process and were identical except host names and serial numbers. It was like insisting every individual muffin from a bakery faced inspection before hitting the shelf. This manager didn't face criticism very well, and refused to acknowledge her individual approval was a waste of time and needlessly repetitive. So, she blamed the build process for taking too long. WTF? The build takes less than an hour, and a single technician could do about 6 simultaneously. So, of course, a meeting is called to see what, if anything, can be done to speed up the build process, and reduce the delays being complained about. As the meeting starts, I mention I've brought a laptop and have hooked it into a projector so we can all witness the build process and attendees can actually watch it run while we talk. And I've brought a stopwatch as well. The manager goes into a diatribe about customer service, improving processes, collaboration between teams, yada yada, while people keep glancing at the projected build process flying by without me touching a thing. This is where it gets weird. After nearly 30 minutes of her rambling, I'm finally allowed to pose a question, and I ask politely, "Excuse me, P, but where did you get the idea that the build process was to blame? What was the impetus of the idea that the automatic build took too long and is the cause of these delays?" Almost on cue, the laptop going through the build rebooted to finish off the last few installations and did a system chime/bing showing it was restarting. She was startled and asked, "What was that?" I answered it was the laptop finishing off the build, and oh, by the way, according to the stopwatch, we're about 33 minutes into the meeting, and I started the process at the beginning of it. She was livid and demanded to know why I was using obscene language. Everyone in the meeting went silent and turned with quizzical faces toward Manager P. I paused, not sure what the heck she was talking about, and asked, "Excuse me, what obscene language?" She replied saying she wasn't going to repeat it, but was sure everyone else had heard me. Everyone started looking at each other and, again, back to Manager P. As politely as I could, I asked, "P, I'm not quite sure what language you're referring to, but as we can all see the system build is nearly done, we're not quite 40 minutes into the meeting according to the stopwatch, and every system is built using the same process. So could we possibly reconsider the necessity to review every system before it goes out to staff?" After some time, she relented that she'd reduce the reviews to a system a week to, quote, "make sure we're building the systems right," and her comment about language seemed to fade. A day later, I'm pulled into my manager's office and told I was being cited for using inappropriate language during the previous meeting. I'm shocked. What language can anyone tell me that I said was inappropriate? I'm told that Manager P stated I'd thought her idea was without merit and used a sexual innuendo to get a reaction. Huh? WTF? So I ask, what sexual innuendo? The manager coughs and mutters, "She said that you said her idea was impotent." My jaw dropped, and carefully I explained exactly what I'd in fact said was what was the impetus of the idea. The manager closes his eyes and shakes his head. Okay, let me just confirm with someone else at the meeting, and we can put this to rest. A day later, my manager confirmed what I'd in fact asked about in the meeting, and had to have a polite but rather awkward conversation with Manager P on vocabulary. He asked me later to, quote, "please use simpler words when dealing with Manager P, okay?" That's hilarious. This reminds me of that weird phase when you're a kid and learning swears for the first time. You hear a word vaguely similar to a swear, and for a second you think to yourself, oh my god, was that a swear? Did they just swear? Or maybe nobody has done this before and I'm just weird. Let me know in the comments. Anyway, the icing on the cake for this story was OP's manager saying, "please use simpler words when dealing with Manager P." Just amazing. Our next story is from Salty Fire Trucks. CEO almost fired me on the spot. So I worked at tech support for a big German retailer, and the CEO's laptop needed some updates on several programs, because we weren't allowed to push that remotely on him, his rule. I go into his office, and he was already annoyed about the fact it was going to take longer than 2 seconds. So he said he was going on break, so I did the thing and left. Took me 30 seconds. I get a call from him 5 minutes later. "You effed up my computer. My screen is flashing and I can't press anything. Get in here now." Sweat pouring down my back as I took the elevator and came back in. "What the F did you do? I can't do crap here without you guys messing up every tiny thing. I swear I'm getting a whole new department if this crap happens again." I looked. Screen flashing. Couldn't even get a reboot. Panic intensifies. I look over to the side of his desk, and there's a remote numpad with a folder on the enter key. I pushed the folder off the thing, and couldn't hide the grin off my face. This didn't happen, okay? Don't tell anyone downstairs. First thing I did. Condescending F. Short and sweet, but I'm pretty sure I've done something similar before. I guess the simplest solutions are usually the answer to the problem. Our next story of the day is from Teddy of the Bright Star. Are you sure you want to fire me? English is not my native language, so please forgive any typos. A couple of years ago, I worked in a big energy infrastructure company. I worked there for over 4 years, starting out as a technician. But because I'm a very IT-oriented person, I soon found myself doing server maintenance and also new server room builds. Because of the nature of the industry in my country, I happen to be one of the few on-site IT support guys in the whole country. Later, I found myself to be the only one, since all the others moved to different positions. I also did regular energy production maintenance, because for some reason, the company felt they didn't need a full-time on-site IT support. About 3.5 years into my employment, I was diagnosed with an illness that affected my production maintenance part greatly. In fact, I couldn't do that anymore at all. I won't go into details with this. I could and was still doing the on-site IT support and installations since I was by far the most qualified and also the only one who was doing that at the moment. Our main IT crew was located in another country, but I still made friends with most of them in my years of on-site IT support. At some point, when the equipment was many years old, we started having problems with it. I began having jobs hundreds of kilometers away and also in completely different maintenance areas as well, because all of the other support guys moved to different positions. I had a colleague in maintenance that I started to take along to some of the jobs, just because I really needed some help. Some of the tasks took several days, sometimes even a week of traveling to do them all. He wasn't really qualified for IT, but I thought he'll learn as I teach him. It turned out he actually learned some, but he was also very sloppy and got distracted very quickly. One time, he even got himself electrocuted with the mains rail when doing server maintenance, but that's a completely different story. It turned out the company was not happy because of the illness I had, and wanted me out. I could still do the IT stuff completely fine, but since that was not the position they hired me for, they started to give me a hard time. I contacted some of my colleagues abroad, and they all said they really needed me for IT support and installations. After some time, the big bosses decided they didn't need me anymore since I was not able to do the work they originally hired me for. Let me remind you, at this time I was the only on-site IT support guy in the whole country that was qualified to do that job. Some months went by, and I was eventually fired. I tried to fight this termination with a union lawyer, with my boss and other colleagues in maintenance, but had no luck. I had 6 months left and then I was out. I had no problem doing IT support because my illness didn't really affect that part of the job. Almost immediately after I was no longer working, I started getting phone calls from the colleague I previously tried to train for the same job I was doing. He had his hands full with all the stuff I used to do before, but I could clearly tell he had not listened to half of what I told him. He was calling me to ask the most basic questions of how to do maintenance and troubleshooting. I was dumbfounded that they actually moved this guy to IT support since he had absolutely no idea how to do it. And I also recall telling my boss that this guy is not fit for the job. After a while, I heard that the local boss, who was a really nice guy and on my side, was in trouble because he had no qualified local IT support for server maintenance, and the guys abroad were asking what happened to me and they needed stuff to be done. To this date, they still haven't got anyone qualified to do the job, and the guys abroad regularly have to travel hundreds or even thousands of kilometers to do maintenance and installations that I previously completed in some hours. I can't see how the company saved money on this. It's crazy how detached most of the management is from the actual work and tasks. I think the only thing I'd like to comment on this is big companies can be really dumb. In every sense, firing OP was a horrible decision. I hope OP eventually gets a call from his old job saying, hey, come back, we'll pay you double, but he's, already making more somewhere else. That would be pretty awesome. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and I'll see you in the next video.